Good morning and welcome to TVP World News. I'm your host, Diana Skaya. This morning, we'll closely be monitoring the situation around the U.S. tariffs. It will be our top story, with some firm comments from the European Union and a surprising turn of events when it comes to Canada. Speaking from the Oval Office, Donald Trump has said the European Union abused the United States for years and threatened reciprocal tariffs. Now, the U.S. president also added that the EU's VAT tax, which according to Trump is through the roof, is already a kind of a tariff.
The European has abused the United States for years, and they can't do that. And they want to make a deal. Let me tell you, in all cases, they all want to make deals. There's nobody that doesn't want to make deals. They've been abusers, and they want to make deals. So we'll see about that. But we'll have, I think, some very fair. All we want is a fair deal. And you know, there's a word, reciprocal. I'd go right now, reciprocal tariffs on everybody, because many of the countries that you feel so horrible about the way they're being treated by Trump, you're saying, oh, President Trump is so terrible to them. Well, they charge us tariffs. European Union has a VAT tax, which is through the roof, okay? It's a similar thing, similar to a tariff.
The European Union wants a constructive dialogue with the United States, but is ready to respond firmly if it is unfairly targeted by the new Trump administration, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said on Monday, following her informal meeting of EU leaders in Belgium. Now, her statement was echoed by the head of the European Council, Antonio Costa, who defended European values and the bloc's territorial integrity.
The European Union is prepared for a robust but constructive dialogue with the United States. But we also recognize potential challenges in the relationship with the United States, and we are ready for that. When targeted, unfairly or arbitrarily, the European Union will respond firmly. This weekend, we witnessed how steep tariffs were imposed on Canada and Mexico. Those tariffs raise business costs, they harm workers and consumers, they create unnecessary economic disruption and drive inflation. We do not see much good coming out of this.
So if the territorial integrity of a member state of the European Union is questioned, and preserving the territorial integrity of the Kingdom of Denmark, its sovereignty and the inviolability of its borders is essential for all member states. And the European Union fully supports the Kingdom of Denmark.
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has said that the EU is strong and has every possibility to pursue its own interests. Now, following Monday's informal meeting of EU leaders in Brussels, Scholz said that this statement is also a message to the United States. These remarks come after the U.S. President Donald Trump threatened to impose trade tariffs on the European Union.
The major topic was, of course, the question of how we want to position ourselves with the USA in the near future, wanting to work together. Trade is a major topic, that's no surprise. And that's why it's important that everyone here agrees. We are strong as the European Union. We have every possibility to ensure that we can pursue our own interests. And that is also a message to the USA, which at the same time is linked to an outstretched hand, namely that we would like to cooperate with each other. This is also a key issue.
U.S. President Donald Trump has decided to pause the introduction of tariffs on imports from Mexico and Canada. Now, the move came after Trump held 2 phone calls last evening with leaders from both countries. The new measures will not be implemented for 30 days. Now, during a phone call with the American president, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau committed to deploying 10,000 additional border control officers. Based on this assurance, Trump halted the 25% flat tariffs for the coming month. A similar conversation took place between Trump and the president of Mexico. During the call, the pair agreed to hold talks on trade and security, with Mexico dispatching additional 10,000 National Guard troops to the U.S. border. Justin Trudeau has commented on the 30-day halt to U.S. tariffs on goods imported from Canada and Mexico. Now, in a social media post, the Canadian Prime Minister has said that the country is implementing a $1.3 billion plan to reinforce the border. This includes new helicopters, technology, and additional personnel deployed in close coordination with their American counterparts.
I just had a good call with President Trump. Canada is implementing our $1.3 billion border plan, reinforcing the border with new choppers, technology and personnel, enhanced coordination with our American partners, and increased resources to stop the flow of fentanyl. Nearly 10,000 frontline personnel are and will be working on protecting the border. Proposed tariffs will be paused for at least 30 days while we work together.
China is set to impose retaliatory tariffs against the United States. The measures will hit U.S. imports of large engine cars, trucks, LNG, crude oil, and agricultural machinery. Now, the tariffs include a 15% tax on coal and liquefied natural gas imports from the U.S. Crude oil, agricultural machinery, pickup trucks, and large engine cars will face a 10% tariff. The move comes after a deadline set by Donald Trump passed overnight, and new 10% tariffs on Chinese imports came into effect. Now, the move escalates tensions between the two largest economies in the world. To avoid such issues, authorities in Beijing called for talks to negotiate a deal, but to no avail. China's President Xi Jinping is expected to speak with his American counterpart to resolve the matter by the end of this week. Trade ministers of the European Union are meeting for the final day of talks in Warsaw to discuss alignment of trade and industrial policies. Now, the officials will assess the current tools supporting the EU's global competitiveness and the European industrial ecosystem. Now, the ministers will debate how to increase resilience of the single European market and develop a common approach to the EU's external partners, including the United States. Now, to this end, there will be a working session for EU heads of delegations on the future of the transatlantic partnership. The informal summit in Warsaw is part of the Polish presidency of the Council of the European Union for the year 2025. How should Europe fund its defense sector, and who should bear the cost? These questions took center stage at Monday's informal security summit in Brussels, where European leaders gathered to discuss the issue. EU correspondent Angela Skujins reports from the Belgian capital.
How can Europe strengthen its defence sector, and how should it pay for it? EU leaders have been tasked with figuring out possible answers to these questions at an informal summit here in Brussels. Defence is at the top of the agenda. They've been tasked with looking at these financing options, whether the EU should pull from its coffers to bolster the sector, or whether it should sit with EU member states and their own competencies. Now, these European leaders have also been tasked with exploring where this manufacturing should take place. We've heard from the French President Emmanuel Macron. He wants that to remain in Europe, while other leaders are suggesting that urgency needs to be prioritised rather than domestic manufacturing. The UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer was also in attendance at these talks. It's the first time a British Prime Minister has participated at an informal summit here in Brussels in 5 years since that country left the EU. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte also paid a visit. He voiced his reiterating concern that the EU needs to spend more to be safe. He also told reporters that the EU should mull, and NATO members should mull, a revision upwards of that 2% funding benchmark. But the aim of these talks is to present possible solutions and holes, problems to the European Commission and the Council. They will publish these suggestions in a white paper, which will then go to a NATO board. Now, these NATO alliance members will meet at a summer summit where they will vote on these new funding benchmarks, and hopefully we'll see some answers to those defence questions. This is Angela Skujins for TVP World, reporting from Brussels.
The United States earmarked billions in additional aid for Ukraine in the weeks before President Donald Trump's inauguration. But major delays mean much of it is arriving at the front too late or not at all.
This is what a growing number of American-supplied armored vehicles are doing. They're sitting in a garage being repaired. But the time to put them back where they belong, on the battlefield, increases owing to a shortage of spare parts.
There were many times when we were unable to evacuate injured troops because we didn't have enough vehicles. We didn't make it to them in time, and they died. This happens often. It's difficult to talk about.
In an effort to improve Ukraine's position before transferring power, then U.S. President Joe Biden signed off on $2 billion in last-minute aid packages for Ukraine. His successor, Donald Trump, has often criticized aid to the invaded country during his campaign. Now he has the power to halt all aid to Ukraine, even the aid that has already been committed.
I think Zelensky is maybe the greatest salesman of any politician that's ever lived. Every time he comes to our country, he walks away with $60 billion.
None of the last-minute aid has reached Ukraine yet. In fact, it can take anywhere from 6 to 9 months for U.S. equipment and parts to reach soldiers. Many of the later delays are due to American political squabbling, most notably a months-long delay of a $60 billion package early last year. But there have also been issues with supply chain tracking.
You start getting calls. Where is the stuff? Where are the shells? Where are the vehicles? Where are the missiles? And you don't know what to say because there has been promises made.
Meanwhile, the delays continue to have a direct impact on the battlefield, for Ukraine, in a bad way.
Taking over as U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio has also been named the director of the United States Agency for International Development. Now, while on a state visit to El Salvador, Rubio said that his goal is to align foreign aid with American national interests.
I'm the acting director of USAID. I've delegated that authority to someone, but I stay in touch with him. And again, our goal was to go in and align our foreign aid to the national interest. USAID has a history of sort of ignoring that and deciding that there's somehow a global charity separate from the national interest. These are taxpayer dollars. And so I'm very troubled by these reports that they've been unwilling to cooperate with people who are asking simple questions about what does this program do, who gets the money, who are our contractors, who's funded. And that sort of level of insubordination makes it impossible to conduct a sort of mature and serious review.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is reportedly extending his Washington visit. He's now set to return to Israel on Saturday. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump will host Prime Minister Netanyahu at the White House on Tuesday. The two leaders will discuss bilateral relations and deepening ties between the two countries, as well as the ongoing war in Gaza and Israel's relations with Iran and regional allies. Netanyahu, who faces an arrest warrant from the International Criminal Court over allegations of committing war crimes in Gaza, is expected to hold a meeting with U.S. military leaders at the Pentagon on Wednesday and talk with members of Congress on Thursday. Dodwiki? Stay with us for an interview with Kawa Hassan, a non-resident fellow with the Stimson Center. Right after this bulletin, we'll be digging into this story further. And that's all for this edition of TVP World News. I'm Diana Skaya. Thanks for watching.